Hey guys, welcome back to Home Built, and this week we are back on the Frankenhauler and hopefully we can button up these doors and move on. Alright guys, welcome back, and those who have been watching and following for some time know that this is the Frankenhauler. This is my 1954 Ford F600 truck that I have mounted onto a Toyota Coaster bus chassis. If you missed the last episode on this where I was working on the doors, I'll put a link up above so you can catch up. And like always, please like and comment. That stuff all really helps the crazy algorithm. So where we left off, basically I finished putting in the Toyota locks into the doors and all of that functionality was all working there, and I was very happy with the final result of that. Then I was fixing up the last sort of bits of the rust, which are particularly bad on the passenger door, welding in all of the bottom of that door, and I ran out of gas. So I have actually got half a weld going across the door. There's big warps in the door and all sorts of stuff that I need to sort out. So let's not mess around, let's get straight into it. I'm going to clean up that weld and then start hammer dolling it and weld the rest of it, and we'll just button this passenger door up. So first things first, I grind down the weld that I did last week and just panel beaded everything and got it all nice and flat. So I started with a nice, flat, smooth, even surface the way I want it. Then with the TIG, my intention was to do one solid weld all the way through, but every now and then I'm terrible. I dip the tungsten, I have to go and regrind the tungsten, or if the panels aren't perfectly aligned, then I sort of skipped it and moved on, and then panel beaded it, got them nice and level, and then went back and finished the welding off afterwards. And then back with the hammer and dolly to get everything nice and flat and even again, because every time you weld it, it warps it a little bit, but that is all part of this TIG welding process. And I'm using the hammer off dolly technique. So generally what you're trying to do is not actually hit the highs down. You often try and push the low up with the dolly underneath the panel and then hammer around the edge of the low to smooth the panel out. Alright, so I welded this gap, I've ground it back, and I've done a fair bit of panel beading, and this is nice and flat. But I have an issue. At the moment, there is some oil canning here, so this panel has still got a little bit too much spring in it. So what I need to do is I need to keep working around the edges of this, try and get rid of that spring in that, so that it holds its shape and I don't have this oil canning, which is definitely not desirable. So at first I thought I could potentially hammer around the edge and sort of lift the oil canning section up and push the rest down, and that didn't work. I needed to shrink the panel in sections. So I'm starting on my join line and I'm using a heat shrinking method where I use my blowtorch to heat up the metal in one spot, and that makes the metal expand and it rises up like an egg, and while it's still hot I actually panel beat out that egg and force it down back flat again. Then as the metal cools, it contracts, shrinking the panel. Alright, a bit of heat shrinking, and this is much better. So we don't have any major oil canning anymore. Basically what I did, if you saw, I used just the heat torch, and basically when you heat up an area, the metal expands and it rises up and it makes a bit of an egg that you can visibly see in the panel. And what I do is with my bumping file, so this is just a file that's just been bent, and basically I knock that egg down, and what that egg, by knocking that egg down, it knocks it into itself and actually shrinks it, and then when it cools, it pulls it tight and that removes that oil canning, and it's quite effective. So I've gone through there, and as I said, now there's no more oil canning in this. That is good. I've got a nice, reasonably flat surface to work with. More than good enough for this job, so let's flip it over and weld up the rest of it. So now it's time to go around and clean up where I mounted my Toyota door locks. If you watched previously, I had only tacked everything in place, so now I'm going through and welding it in solid. While I'm at it, there's also a bunch of unused holes that I need to fill. So I've actually got my magnetic plug tool, which has got a copper head on it. So basically I stick that behind the hole and the weld won't stick to it, so I have something to weld against. It makes it much easier to fill in the holes. There's a link in the description if you're after one yourself. And there goes the camera again. I have gone through so many cameras now, it is not funny. This one survived, but it's looking a little worse for wear. Then I just finish it all off by grinding back the welds and making it nice and tidy. Alright, so now I have welded in the lock, that's looking good, and I also patched in all of the holes that aren't being used. So what is left is the holes that I actually need for bolting everything on. Everything else is blocked up. So now I need to get the bottom all welded on. But what I want to do is I want to move the cab forward, refit the door before I do that so that I can make sure everything lines up. So moving the truck is not easy, but a great tip is if you ever have to push a vehicle by yourself, if you push by the top of the tyre, you actually get a 2-to-1 advantage and makes life a lot easier. Then I mount up the door and see how badly I have aligned everything. And what I realised is that the front edge needs to actually be extended forward and the trailing edge actually needs to be cut back further. So what I do is I've marked out the lines of where I want my new folded edge to be, and then peel everything open and fold them back the way that I would like them. For the folding, I started with regular pliers, but I find that this Nipex pliers wrench is fantastic. With the smooth jaws that come in straight, it's perfect for this job. It's one of my favourite tools, not sponsored and they're expensive, but absolutely worthwhile. There's also a link in the description for them if you're interested. Alright, so you can see here I've actually opened out this seam, so you can see where that line is there. That's where the old seam had gone on the replacement panel, and that's obviously not where I want it. I wanted it over further, so I actually unpicked it and refolded it out a bit wider, and that is looking much closer to what I need. It's probably a little bit too wide. You can see this seam all the way up is very tight. Gets a little bit wider up here, but the door is not currently closed. On this side, the seam is currently too far this way. So what I need to do is I need to draw a line onto this panel showing where exactly I want my seam to be, and then fold it over with a hammer and dolly so that I can actually get the door into the place I want it to be. So I'm still not happy with the position of the edge, so I unfold it again and then fold it back exactly where I want it again. It's very time consuming backwards and forwards like this, but well worthwhile in the end, taking my time now. The next thing I don't like is that the bottom of the door doesn't curve under far enough. A lot of that is to do with my welding the inner panel along the side, so I had to cut it all open again. Alright, so I made a mistake, and I sort of knew it when I was doing it, but I thought I'd get away with it on this rough old truck, is I welded this panel all on to the door without lining it up to the body of the truck first, and there was a big gap down here. There's still a little bit of a gap, but that's not too bad now. But I had to actually cut apart my welds and sort of do a bit of mangling to get it sort of at a better angle at the bottom. So now that's looking reasonably good. The front edge is still not great. This front edge is still all sitting out too far, so I need to do something about that. But what I need to do now is get this off of the truck again and do a little bit more fettling before I put it all on for good. But let's see if we can make this fit a little bit better. So the door has to come off again, and then I'm unfolding a lot of the outer skin from the inner skin and cutting apart the side where I welded that inner skin on so that I can get the flex that I need on the bottom of the door. Then I mount the door up again, and I can then start flexing the door and trying to work out exactly where I want it. Now I'm finally happy with the new angle of the bottom of the door. I can weld up the side panel again and make up some patches so that it all joins back up. as I opened it up, I had to actually cut out a little wedge of steel and weld that in. And you can see here I'm even resorting to the MIG in some of it just because there's bigger gaps, and it was just easier in this particular instance than using the TIG. Alright, that was a lot of work. So much work getting the extension panel on all the way around, and the panel gaps are quite good all the way around. It's not beautiful, it's not 100% perfect, but it's well and truly good enough for this old truck. So I'm happy with that. This whole door is all welded up now. Even all of the excess holes and things have all been welded up. So now we can move on to the driver's side. All right, so moving on to the driver's door. First thing I want to do is I've got to strip out the handles and stuff, strip off all of the rubber and stuff around the edge that's turned into bubbled, crusty mess. And then we can start having a look at how much rust is actually in this thing. So first it's just removing all of the door locks and mechanisms that I had still inside the door, and then I can start going around the outside with a screwdriver and just scraping off all of this dried rubber goo that's all around the edge. That's sort of a weird, bubbled, horrible mess. And for really messy jobs like this, I start grinding it back with my world-class air-fed mask, which obviously protects me from all of the dust, but it also has the added bonus it doesn't fog up, so it is perfect for this sort of really messy stuff. At first I thought I just had a couple little holes here, but once I actually hit this bottom piece with the wire wheel, it actually popped a few holes where basically it was just hanging in there. I really love this old writing that's on here, so I'm going to try and damage as little of that as possible, but what I think I need to do is I need to get a new strip to replace this all the way along the bottom and kick up here just a little bit. I think that is a must, and let's flip it over and show you the back. As for the back, this is actually in really good nick. Once I got rid of all that rubber that just looked horrible all the way around the edge, this is actually in really good condition. The only real bits where there's an issue, I can see a ground back all along here, that's still all fine, just a little bit of surface. There's a tiny little pinhole there, and there's a couple of little holes along the bottom, and that's it. And then just this corner here. So it overall is in fantastic condition on the inside, so just a couple of patches needed and we should be good. So one of the last things that I hadn't removed was on this driver's door. I think it was the mount for the original mirror. I'm not exactly sure, but it was just a weird bracket sticking out through the door, so it took a little bit to get this off, and I ended up having to drill out the bolt that I snapped off, and then a little bit of panel beating on a dent that was on the edge before I start measuring up my patch panel. As there was only a couple of little tiny spots of rust on this door, I didn't bother buying a pre-made patch panel because I knew I could make it relatively easily, although it did end up being a little bit bigger than I had expected. Alright, I have my patch for the lower part of the door, but I want to give it a little bit of a crown. So I've got on the English wheel, I've actually got the rubber on the top part of the wheel, so that generally will help it so that it curves in one direction instead of in two directions, and I don't need that much of a curve going this way. I really need the curve going sideways, so let's see how that goes. So I'm still relatively inexperienced with this English wheel, but I am enjoying the process of learning different ways of shaping metal, and it's quite rewarding just using these methods that they've been using for hundreds of years. Alright, so I've got quite a curve in this panel now. Now it has curved this way as well as curving that way. This is really the curve I'm after. This will straighten out quite well, particularly now because I'm going to get on the brake and I'm going to fold over this lower edge, and that will assist me in getting it straight and ready for putting on the car. I really hate this brake. I definitely think a new brake is on my list of tools I need to get in the not too distant future. And some shed space. Alright, so I've got my patch panel, and obviously this kick up is for the extra rust on that door, and to get my folds. I folded over this lower edge, so I've still got a nice little curve, a little crown over here. I've got this lip folded over, ready to be tucked around behind the door, and then I folded over this edge, but obviously that made it square, so then I got on the shrinker, and by shrinking this edge, it pulls this edge in, this edge stays big, and it pulls this curve into the panel so that it fits the door beautifully. All right, and I have my panel, and it fits beautifully along the bottom of the door. That's a really nice curve and shape. And what I need to do now is I need to scribe along the edge all the way along and trim off the rusted section and the mangled section that's here. Get rid of all of that, and then I can look at what I need to do to tack it on. Now I have left the far end without folding it over, because if I made it fold over here, it's actually going to be just too long. So I want to actually score it, cut it, trim off what I need, and then work out exactly where I want my final fold and make that all fit. So let's do that. So I start by scribing out the patch panel and then trim off the unwanted area. Then using the angle grinder, I grind through the folded over edge to separate the bits of door skin, get it all off, and then make sure my patch panel is the right size. I can then use the wire wheel on all the rust on the inside of the door, and then I can just start filling up those pinholes I showed you on the inner panel. For this, I'm again using my magnetic plug tool. It really makes this much easier to do, and it's quite fine work with this old steel to try and make these patches, but it's quite effective. And now in this corner I need to replace a section, so I'm making a template and then bashing it to get a bit of the shape I need. Cut out the old piece and make sure that it all fits up quite nicely. A bit of trim and fit, trim and fit. And then there's an inner section that I thought would be easier to make in two pieces. So I'm welding in this smaller inner section first, and then I can weld the outer section to that. I scrape out a little bit of the excess paint and gunk from the inside so I can get rid of it easily while the door skin is open at the bottom. Do the last of the grinding and get ready to put my patch in. A bit of weld through primer before I line up my patch panel and get everything fitting just the way I like it. And then I start tacking the panel on in a few different areas and trying to keep everything nice and smooth. I have to sort of get in, and it's really uncomfortable to panel beat it. I wasn't happy, so I had to cut it open and then start tacking it again, and just make sure that I've got a perfect alignment all the way along. I have definitely learnt the hard way that if you don't get it perfect at this stage, then you're chasing your tail for ages and you create so much more work for yourself down the line. You need to get everything exactly right now, and then you can just weld the whole thing up solid. It doesn't matter if it warps a little bit at this stage, because once you've got the weld done all the way along, you can clean it up, grind it back, and then do the panel beating, and you can bring it back out to a nice, very neat, flat finish. And you can see I had to actually flip the door up on its side to get a dolly inside. It was quite difficult to get to do the panel beating on this door, but I'm quite happy with the result. Alright, that was a lot of work to get this on, but I have my lower patch on there, but there's still more to do. I've still got to go back. I've got to fill up this hole here. There's a bunch of holes on the side that I need to fill up. I need to fix where the door handle patches on. So I'm definitely not finished on these doors yet, so that will make some of you happy. There's definitely has not been enough door videos. I know I've been on this for a while, but this is just, it takes as long as it takes. So Hopefully you'll join me when I tackle this again next time. But for now, I think it means it's time for Fun Facts with Mrs. Jeff.
Hey guys, by 1930, Ford's luxury brand Lincoln was firmly established in the high-end offerings of cars of the time. And in 1931, Lincoln released its all-new K Series. For the first year, they were available with the Lincoln L Series V8, but for 1932, they released the Lincoln L Series 7.3-litre V12, making 150 horsepower. And by the following year, the V8 was dropped completely, making Lincoln the first brand to only offer a V12 engine. This helped the Lincoln to directly compete with the Cadillac V12, as well as more exotic brands such as the Duesenberg, Bugatti, Bentley, Rolls-Royce and Mercedes-Benz. Factory bodies included 2- and 4-door Phaetons, but Lincoln also supplies customers with a long list of coach builders for custom bodywork. The Model K actually continued for 10 years with various visual upgrades. One of the most famous was the Sunshine Special, which was a modified Model K in 1939 that served as state vehicle for several US presidents, including Franklin D. Roosevelt and Harry Truman.
All right, we are still going on the doors. I know it is continuing like saga that never seems to end. Don't worry, it's definitely that way for me as well, but we are almost there. There's a few little bits and pieces I can tidy up next time, but that shouldn't actually take me a full episode, and I should be able to move on to other things.
So the saga continues.
Yes, we're very close to finishing the cab. Then we need to remove the cab, and then I need to sort of get in and finish up welding and fix the floor and things like that. So we're getting there. We're getting very close, and then we can start on the fun stuff like the tray on the back.
Yay! Like, subscribe, let Jeff know what you think of his videos. Patreon, of course, help us out. And see the videos a day early with no ads. And I feel like Mrs. Jeff was a bit garbled today, but we're going to roll with it.
We're just rolling with it.
All right.
All right, guys. See you next time.
Bye, guys. For the first year, they were available with the Lincoln L Series V8. But in 1932, damn it, this helped the Lincoln V12 to directly complete. This helped Lincoln. Quickly! This helped the Lincoln to directly compete with the Cadillac. This helped the Lincoln to directly
Yes.
Nailed that one.